You would think that in this moment, what are we at? The 28th? We're 18 days removed from the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the killing of Charlie Kirk, the Republicans' apoplectic reaction that they killed him. This is political violence from Democrats, even though we don't know anything yet, really, truly about what took place, about the person at all. And there's been a lot of talk from a lot of Republicans, from a lot of conservatives, from a lot of MAGA activists about political violence, finally they're denouncing political violence after Donald Trump has incited it and encouraged it and welcomed it for years. Not among some, though. An elected official in Arizona is calling for the execution of a sitting United States Congresswoman, Pramila Jayapal, from Washington State. In the wake of all that's taken place, he's calling for her killing, for her execution. And I don't know what you think about what political violence is, but when the state, when the government executes someone, that's about as politically violent as it gets, because the power of the state to execute a criminal or someone convicted is done through political policy. And if that is violence that is then carried out, that is political violence by definition. But let me tell you who this guy is. John Gillette is his name. Former cop, former brutal, aggressive cop. Stick around to the end. I don't want to bore everybody who's not interested in it and they end up clicking off. But if you're interested, stick around. Maybe the most violent cop in the country when he was there. I'll get to it. He tweeted this at Val Demings, who is I don't know if she's still in office, but was a Democratic congresswoman from Florida for a long time, a cop, a chief of police for a long time. She tweeted this about the pardons of the January 6th insurrectionists. You won't be surprised to know that he's a supporter of January 6th. As a former law enforcement officer and member of the Fraternal Order of Police and Police Benevolent Association, I don't know if you're bragging or complaining there, Val. It's a fascist organization you're bragging about being a part of. Jackbooted thugs, the police unions. I am waiting for America's law enforcement unions to condemn the pardons of violent offenders who assault police officers on January 6th, quote unquote, back the blue. Are you still holding your breath waiting for that, Val Demings, cop? He replied, many of the January 6th political prisoners, he called them, have been confined without be charged. 4 years, no trial. We know your type. I bet your departments hated you. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, strikes again, says this racist piece of shit, John Gillette, who's now calling for the execution of another woman of color, Pramila Jayapal. This is the tweet, another tweet of him talking about political violence being bad. Then we'll get to the article. Unfortunate political violence is unacceptable, he says. We conservatives use words. The left and legacy media have radicalized unstable people with their rhetoric. I disagree with Lil Rubin, I'm assuming he means Ruben Gallego, on almost everything except his right to speak whatever BS he is selling. So he's against political violence, even unless it's January 6th insurrectionists who violently attempted to overthrow the United States government in order to keep Donald Trump in power. Gotcha. Totally makes sense. It's tracking now. I'm with you, John Gillette. I'm with you. Up until this headline. Republican Arizona lawmaker makes post calling for execution of Democratic Congresswoman John Gillette on Twitter, called for people like Pramila Jayapal to be hanged in response to her video on anti-Trump protests. An Arizona Republican state representative who had expressed support for January 6th insurrectionists on Wednesday called for a Democratic congresswoman to be executed as a response to a video clip. The comment on Twitter by State Representative John Gillette of Kingman, Arizona, first reported by the Arizona Mirror, was a reaction to a short clip drawn from a YouTube video in March by U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal, a longtime Democratic congresswoman representing Washington state, entitled, quote, "The Resistance Lab In the video, Jayapal discusses preparations for street protests amid the Trump administration. Until people like this, that advocate for the overthrow of the American government are tried, convicted, and hanged, it will continue, he posted. He didn't have this attitude when white men, armed, violent white supremacists, stormed the United States Capitol with the express motivation of overthrowing the overthrow of the American government. They were tried, they were convicted, but they weren't hanged. None of them were hanged. So according to his logic, they should have been, though, apparently, unless you look at his other tweets. Nothing in either the clip or the longer video actually suggests Jayapal is advocating for the overthrow of the United States government. The video carries explicit calls for nonviolent protest and discussed with alarm a rise in political violence in the United States. Gillette's comment is a continuation of a string of inflammatory far-right online invective by the Mojave County Republican and retired Army Reserve Command Sergeant Major. Gillette has defended January 6 protesters who were intent on violently overturning Trump's defeat by Joe Biden in the 2020 election as political prisoners, as I've talked about, and described Muslims as terrorists. 2 more sentences. It also reflects a widening call among Republicans to criminalize protest and speech critical of the Trump administration. Gillette, of course, because he's a coward, has not yet responded to requests from the Guardian for comment. Now, let me tell you a little bit about who this piece of shit is. This former cop. This disgraced former cop who resigned as soon as a law was passed. By the way, he moved from Illinois to Arizona. Yeah, I guess to get away from his past as being a brutal cop. But they passed a law in Illinois that made a court ruled that internal affairs files concerning cops can be made public. They can't be shielded from public view through Freedom of Information Act requests. And as soon as that happened, he resigned. Here's the headline from the State Journal Register. Was Gillette a rogue deputy or a good cop? And then as a result of the ruling that I just explained, the State Journal Register has obtained files on Gillette and other deputies and is seeking more records from the Illinois State Police and the Springfield Police Departments. And this is how brutal a cop he was. Listen to this in comparison to the other complaints of brutality that were made against his particular department. By himself, the article says, Gillette racked up more complaints during his 13 years on patrol than the entire department generated in 2005, 2006, and 2007 combined. More than 70 deputies work for the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department. Based on the volume, seriousness, and number of sustained complaints, Gillette should have been fired long ago, according to Samuel Walker, a University of Nebraska criminologist who is considered an expert on police misconduct. Quote, "This is one of the worst cases I've heard. Just hearing his record," Walker said. "This sounds really pretty shocking. This officer should have been long gone. There is really a serious failure here." That view is shared by Stephen Meyer, former head of the internal affairs for this county's sheriff's office, who said he would have fired Gillette if he'd had the authority. Quote, "Given the frequency and severity of complaints, there comes a time when the agency has to say enough," said Meyer, who retired in 2001 but remains a sheriff's chaplain. Quote, "I deem law enforcement a profession, and you need to remove those who are not professional." Why would we expect any different? Look, I'm not an ACAB guy. All cops are bastards, but I'm an MCAB guy. Most of them are. You can't look at all of the footage of ICE-related brutality, of ICE-related white supremacy, of ICE-related racism, and say, oh, it's just a few bad apples. You can't look at the masked armed agents of the state who are brutally dealing with civilians and immigrants alike in this country, some who are FBI, some who are Border Patrol, some who are ICE, some who are Park Police, some who are Secret Service. Who knows where they're coming from? Homeland Security investigations. Who knows? You can't look at all these videos and say, oh, it's just isolated incidents. It's not. Up until 2007, that was the narrative. That was the narrative until 2007 when, this is just it's isolated incidents when they would be caught. It was a lot of his word against the perp's word, right? And what happened in 2007? This device came out. And all of a sudden, there's video evidence of cops being cops. So you got this cop, John Gillette, elected representative in Arizona, calling for the execution, that the Trump administration should murder this congresswoman from Washington. Tell me again, Republicans, about your desire for less political violence, for no political violence. Right. Anyway, what do you think? I invite you to this conversation. Please subscribe to this channel on YouTube. It's free to do so. Click the subscribe button. Go like and follow on Facebook. All of these are great ways to support this work. And you can also sound off in the comments and have a conversation about this particular topic, or call the voicemail line 714-576-4054. Of course, you can email me daily@dollemore.com. I love and appreciate you. And if you appreciate me and you want to help support this work, help me produce these videos, first and foremost, go to patreon.com/IDoubtIt podcast for $2 a month. You can help support this work. You can also become a channel member on YouTube by clicking the join button below the video. I'd love that very much. I'll see you next time. Be genuine, be less like John Gillette, and take care of one another.